And welcome to Two Gray Goatees and a Whistle. I got a special guest here today, Coach Eric Nichols from Crane High School over in southeastern part of the state of Oregon. So I'd like to welcome Eric to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So Eric, So Eric, let's talk about what you got going on here. You were somebody who was a head coach at for the boys program there at the high school. Got this right, 4 consecutive state titles at 1A, which to me is insane because it's 1A. It's a little bit different, I think, when you're talking bigger schools. When we're talking small schools, to be able to do something like that, that is incredible. So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit, kind of like your coaching philosophy, and stuff like that. But the first thing I always like to do with my guests is talk about how they got introduced into sports. So what I'm going to be doing is kind of want to get the background. What got you into sports? So I'd like to talk about, at a young age. So think about, I'm not going to question your age because I'm sure you're my age or younger, but let's talk about, let's talk about, how did you get introduced to sports at a young age?
So truth is, I probably came into it later than most. So I grew up about 7 miles out of town in Baker City, Oregon, up along the freeway there in Oregon. So the Boise to Portland freeway, I-84. And I lived 7 miles out, and there wasn't a ton of kids around. I mean, there was some, that lived mile and a half, 2 miles away, but really that was pre-internet, right? So, the old you had to
Right.
dial the old rotary phone. Hey, can Brian or Josh come and play? Whatever. That's when you used to make phone calls. You didn't have to call through your mom's phone and all the things. So really sports wasn't huge in my life as a young kid. But I can remember it must have been a Sunday because CBS, we had like 4 channels, PBS, CBS, and 2 NBCs, because I could get NBC out of Portland and I could get NBC out of Boise. And so I would get the Seahawk games and the Bronco games. So that was awesome. But I can remember turning on CBS and listening to, must have been Dick Stockton, and turning on Magic versus Bird. So Celtics Lakers. And just being enthralled by the amount of people that were as enthralled as well with this basketball game, with Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird, Kareem versus Parrish, all this stuff. Names I didn't know because I wasn't a huge sports fan up to that point. And so I think it was the excitement of the individuals in the broadcast booth, as well as the excitement of the basketball players and the fans, that really got me. That would have been 3rd, 4th grade. That was probably my first exposure to real big sporting events. Had I been to a Shrine football game at Baker? Yes. But nothing at that level that got me that excited of Bird versus Magic. So speaking of age, that probably dates me right there. But that was probably my first real exposure to.
Okay. So for me, I can personally remember some of my first sports memories growing up was the rivalry between the Lakers and Boston. So Bird versus Magic, and so I remember those. And I do remember you had the Portland and the Boise version of NBC. I do remember that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the benefits living on our side of the state. We only get the Portland stations in Boise. And ironically, the Boise station seems to do a little bit better coverage of Eastern Oregon than what Portland did.
Right.
It seems like if there was anything news
Yeah.
worthy.
Yeah.
So
The capital of Eastern Oregon, man, was Boise, right? Because we all watched Boise News.
Yep.
That's how it was. Right?
Yep. Yeah. So going into that, what were some of the sports you did play when you were growing up? Like, organized sports. What kind of piqued your interest when you were growing up?
Yeah, when I was a little guy, I played Little League. Didn't have an awesome experience there. Loved flag football. Because in Baker at the time, we had like community schools, right? So it was North Baker versus South Baker and all the things, Brooklyn and Churchill. And that was super fun. It was very teamy. And then it went into the same through our YMCA, where regional schools played basketball and whatnot. Really, really enjoyed flag football because, like, whoever had the fastest guy scored the most touchdowns, right? Like, get to the outside and go. But so really enjoyed that. And then I got put on the worst team ever for basketball, and so I ended up being probably didn't score the most points, but really, really enjoyed being one of the team leaders, even though I wasn't very good, because that it just kind of fed into that magic bird thing that I was watching on television on Sundays and just allowed me to grow as a well, as a leader and then just as an athlete, just being on not a very good team and where we could all develop together.
Good. So from there, you obviously you grew up, and your experience in sports led you to coaching, which for everybody it hits them a little bit differently. I've talked to people who had experience where they were in high school, and that's when they knew they wanted it. They weren't and how it happens sometimes is they weren't the one playing. They're the one always on the sideline, and they got an appreciation of that perspective from the sideline. It wasn't necessarily from them playing. And then they found that passion, and they got into coaching that way. What was your journey as far as getting to that into coaching? Is it something from high school? Was it after you were in college? Was it when you were quite a bit older? What got you into that career of coaching?
Yeah, good question. Well, first thing you said is, I grew up. Well, that still hasn't happened. So absolutely not, right? Like I've been operating
Right.
on a bell system my entire life, right? Like I'm a principal here at the high school and I still haven't grown up, man. Like absolutely not. And I never intend to. I hope never to. Sometimes I have to act like it, but anyway, that said, no, because I fell in love with sports and because I fell in love with the high school experience, I think I had thought about doing something in education. Like I fell in love in college with American government and the law, and that's kind of the route I was going. But to fill my time as well, I was working a job. I worked various college jobs. I worked at Blockbuster Video, again, aging myself. But I also decided I was going to go help out with high school track. So I went to Boise State and hung out on the blue turf a little bit. When I wasn't doing that, I went and coached at Meridian High and got a job there with the track team. So I started coaching high school track. And then I started coaching girls basketball and just fell in love with coaching and fell in love with the relationships and the difference that you could make. And that probably comes from my high school experience. I really enjoyed high school. I spent a ton of time. While I lived 7 miles out of town, that meant that if I wasn't ready to go at 5 with my mom driving home, that means I had to wait quite a while. And I would hang out at the school, and like the janitors were just cool with that at Baker. And they just, we just had areas to hang out, or I would help out at practices, or I would help out teachers in their classrooms. There's always something going on at a high school. So then my dad was an accountant, and so he worked long, long hours. And so I would get a ride home late at night with him. But so I spent a lot of time there and got to spend a lot of time with some coaches that worked some long hours. I played for Mike Doherty. Mike's the all-time winningest high school coach in Oregon history. Learned a ton from Mike, but I learned a ton from the girls' coaches, and I learned a ton from the track coaches. Joel Richardson was our girls' coach. Susie Cole, track coach, Eric Johnson. I took a ton from all of our high school coaches, and then in those early experiences where I probably just wasn't old enough to get out of high school yet, even in college, probably why I went back to go help out at the high schools, I learned a ton from those coaches. And so as I started going on and thinking about law school, I was like, do I really want to go hang out with a bunch of adults, or do I still want to hang out, have a good time, shoot some threes, and have a good time with kids? And so I got in a really bad car wreck, was hit by a drunk driver in 2000, and that probably helped make up some of my mind. Was like, I'm just not physically capable or mentally capable right now to handle law school. And so kept hanging out that summer at the high school and helping out the track athletes and basketball and whatnot. Just again, continue to fall in love with the difference that you can make for kids and the difference that you can make for a school because of school spirit and all the things.
Nice. So with that, now, so that kind of gets me thinking about how I got into coaching a little bit, and how I got into education. It was kind of backwards. For me, it was, and for you, it sounds like you kind of had the same experience. I started doing coaching before I ever got into education.
Mm.
When I got into coaching, I did coaching, and I was working at a sawmill and all that stuff. And when the mill shut down, he opened up for me to go back to college to get my education
Mm,
degree, and I took it because I figured I love being around kids, working with them. I love coaching. So why is it not? I just translate that into education. So that opportunity came up, and so that's what I've been doing. And so it's one of those things that everybody gets exposed to it a different way, and I love talking about that because it's to me it's to me coaching is is an important aspect to helping youth get ready for what's going to be happening in life. And so the fact that hearing stories like this about how people get started, I think really builds that foundation of understanding where, where people are coming from and how they get into that. So moving from coaching, obviously you got yourself at Crane High School. Now, what people
mm,
outside of Oregon, for the most part, probably, or anybody that's not around Crane, don't understand you're kind of in a unique situation. And you laugh,
yep,
and it's everybody needs to understand that you have a boarding school. So it's not your typical school where kids get a drive down from home or whatever, and they might be down the road or a half a mile or a mile from school. You guys have something very unique there. You guys, and you can talk about it a little bit more, but you guys cover a gigantic area and you have a lot of ranches in the area, farms and everything like that. And so it's just not possible for kids to go home and then come to school every day because there's a huge distance to get there. So you guys are, and you can tell me how many boarding schools are in Oregon, but that's the only one I know of. And so you guys are kind of in a unique situation. So I want to talk about that a little bit and how that might differ from somebody coaching at a school where the kids can go home every day. So
yeah.
first of all, how'd you end up at Crane? Let's talk about how you ended up at Crane, and then from there, is so let's talk about the experience being at Crane, where you're in a situation where you're at a boarding school.
Well, there's probably not a lot of people listening who've been to Crane, right? Like it's not necessarily for a lot of people a destination, right? Like you might be driving through, but driving through to where is what I would wonder. But we do have a nearby hot springs, and so that can be a destination. Like with the Crystal Crane Hot Springs, like that's a hot spot right now, man. So, but that said, I do live in Timbuktu, right? It's a little bit, or excuse me, I live in Timbuk 3, which is a little bit beyond Timbuktu. I'm way out here, right? So we're 30 miles from a tube of toothpaste, right? Like we're 30 miles from Burns. We're 2 hours from the nearest Walmart. All the things. But so when I grew up in grew up in Baker, but then went to school in Boise, and I talked about that a little bit. It was at Meridian High, and then I opened up the largest high school in the state, Mountain View High, in Meridian as well. Well, during that time period, I met this gal who was teaching in Boise, but she was from the Burns area, and we kind of hit it off, which went really well. And then she kind of talked about, she was from Burns, and I was like, oh, well, I hung out. I went to Vail and watched Burns play Vail in basketball, and it was one of the worst basketball games I've ever. I think Burns got the ball past half court 4 times in the first half. Like, they were getting pressed, and it was just like, "Oh my goodness gracious." I just wanted to go help them. So, that said, I was, coaching JV at Mountain View, and I had some conversations with the athletic director, Jim Reed, and great guy, and he was like, "Eric, you just go get some head coaching experience, come back here and take the head job." Anyway, so I was kinda taking some advice, and I was like, "Alright, I'll go get a head job. This Burns job looks like a decent job. There's only one way to go." I mean, they couldn't get any worse. They hadn't won a league game in 5 years, so I end up applying for the job, and I get the job, and we end up moving to Burns, and, I'm like, "Alright, so I'll do the 3-year deal and then go back to Boise, take the Mountain View job or another Boise job and, go from there." Well, here I am 20 years later. I'm in the Burns area, just down the road 30 miles in Crane. 4 children later, but happily married, awesome situation. I was at Burns for 7 years. I then took a middle school principal job, and then I went to a education service district, and then, decided, I wanna get back to helping out kids more directly. Took the principal job here, and then a year later got into the high school basketball deal. In Union High School, is the last union high school in the state. Our school district is just under 10,000 square miles. It encompasses most of Harney County. Harney County is bigger than 7 states. I'll say that again. Harney County, our school district, is bigger than 7 states. So it's bigger than Rhode Island, it's bigger than Connecticut. Like it's a big old area. That is our school district. I've got 83 kids here at the high school. Some of those children come from over 2 hours away because that's the school district. So some of the children come from this far from Nevada, which is Fields. Some of the children come from Double O, which is 15 miles down a gravel road. Some of the kiddos come from French Glen, Diamond, Pine Creek, Druzy, right? And they come here to one high school campus. Because some of them live so far away, they board. So it's a boarding school, right? It's not like a naughty kid boarding school. We got our fair share of naughty kids, but
Yeah.
it's a great situation, man. Girls live upstairs, boys live downstairs. There's a matron and a patron, and we've got 40 of about our 80 kids that board here. It's a sweet, sweet deal. It's different, but it's a sweet deal.
So with that, let's talk about kind of how coaching goes about with this. So you seems like it would give you a little bit more control knowing where your kids are
Mm.
at a boarding school where,
Mm.
I've coached and other coaches I know in the situation, it's like, okay, you got to be here at practice at, you got daily doubles. Okay.
Right,
Be
right.
here at, we're starting practice at 8 o'clock in the morning, and rolls around. Kids aren't there because they're sleeping in. Where there, where they're at, and I'm assuming you could probably go knock on their door like, "Hey, dude, what's going on? Why aren't you
Yeah,
down here?" So
yeah.
with that situation, what is there benefits of having the boarding school versus traditional school? And what are some of the things that are maybe make it a little bit harder? So I'm sure that obviously there's pros and cons on both sides. So what are some of the benefits of
Yeah.
having kids that are boarded where you have a little bit easier access to?
Yeah. Chad, that's a common misconception. Like,
Okay.
a lot of people say, yeah, there's nothing else to do there. Like you go knock on their door and you go play hoops. Okay, right. I buy that argument, but we still have a good chunk of kids that live 45 minutes away that choose not to board. We've got kids still driving 35, 45 minutes to school every day. So yes, we do have some kids here that have access to a gym almost 24/7. But as far as scheduling practices and whatnot, no, I still have to consider like having a 6 a.m. practice in the middle of the winter with snow on the ground and all the things means that it's going to take an hour and 15 minutes for that kid who lives 45 minutes and drives in every day. Like I still have to consider what time he's going to get up and getting home with late practices and all the things. So yeah, we do have a small advantage of some kids living at school. But oftentimes those aren't the kids that, like that's not your 7-footer, right? Whatever. But no, it is a good deal, man. And it's an awesome situation and you do get to spend some time with kids, but it's also really nice to be able to get away from your basketball coach, right? So I truly try not to invade their space. Like that's where they live. And I don't go to kids' houses when I was in Boise. Like I don't go knock on your door and like, hey, let's go, right? Like, no, that's just that like that's where they live. And so yes, we will create some opportunities for them to have open gym, which is, things to do. But I truly, truly try not to invade their space that much. They live in the dorm, and it's very much like a college setting where there's a pool table and a ping pong table and, some of those things that you would find like in a college dorm. But we are so remote. It's not like they're driving to the movie theater, on a Tuesday evening to go watch a movie. It's not like they're driving over to a friend's house to do, because that friend's house is 45 minutes away. And so like they're in the dorm. And so, they might be playing cards, they're doing homework. I wish they'd do more of that. But no, you find things to do, video games, all the things, but there's still some, like I live on campus during the week. We have a teacher's here, right? And like I get a lot of knocks on the door. Coach, can you open up the gym? But right, That's not an everyday thing. Like, they don't wanna see their basketball coach all the time, and they don't wanna see their principal all the time. So, yes, there are huge advantages, but just as much, like, can you imagine living 2 doors down from your English teacher and your math teacher and your
Right.
for some kids, that'd be a day nightmare, right? And for some, it is.
Right.
But no, it's a sweet situation, man. We are super tight. It's definitely community bonds and kid bonds and all the things, but, like, they need their space too. So I'll open up the gym, but sometimes I don't walk through it because, like, "And I've seen you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right?" All the things.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and I like that. So and I like how you're basically creating boundaries because these kids are, that's like their place, and I like how you brought that perspective about, hey, just because I have access doesn't mean I need to be there, and and to me that builds that trust with your players or with your students, that if you can trust them to do what they're supposed to, then I think that goes a long way with the trust.
Appreciate that.
So let's talk
Uh,
about
Chad
building your
Chad, did I
program.
open up the gym?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Chad, did I open up the gym at 6 a.m. so kids could come shoot? You dang right. And did some of those kids choose to walk over there? Yep. And was that a lot easier than having to drive the 10 minutes down to the gym? Yes, it was. It's kind of like going in a hot tub, right? The closer your hot tub is to the door, the more likely you are to get in it, is what those salesmen say. So that was kind of like
Right.
kids shooting in the morning here.
So yeah, and, you got your benefits and stuff, but I do like how you brought up that I can do this, but there's also like boundaries, and how you brought up the perspective of kids want to see their principal teach, or any teachers. And the same thing with teachers and principals. They don't want to see that same kid over and over. It's like, hey, I like you, but I want to go home and not see you for a
Right.
while.
Exactly.
So
You're the
I like
principal.
that take. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Especially the principal's position.
Right.
So let's
Exactly.
talk about the program at Crane. Yeah. So let's talk about how you got this program going. Let's get a little bit of history. When did you first come to Crane when did you actually start coaching the boys team? And then, you did it, up to, I guess, last year. Was that your last year, or
Yep. Yep.
how long did you
2025.
coach at Crane?
So, so my last year in Burns, I started coaching youth. I mean, I'd always coached youth. I mean, that was part of our program, and Burns and Crane are 30 miles apart. And one of the cool things they do here at Crane is they call it rural basketball. So all those little one room schoolhouse, little house in the prairie communities, they might have 4 kids, 12 kids, 20 kids. They will all bring their kids on the weekends here to Crane to play little guy and little girl basketball. So you got your kindergartners running around on the 8-foot hoops, shooting air balls and making threes. And that went all the way up through like 5th grade when they started their middle school program here. So during that, I would bring out the Burns kids to compete in that as well. So worked with little guys for a long, long time. During that same time period, Crane was working with their little guys as well in that same opportunity. And as I transferred out here to Crane, there had been a lot of youth basketball, and some kids from Burns started coming out to Crane just for a different environment, kind of that school choice deal. And so, because Crane had dwindled in population, right? They were down in the high 30s and excuse me, high 30s, low 40s. And so some kids started coming out here to get kind of that hands-on, that the wood shop, the welding, some of those programs that often get cut in schools, unfortunately. And so kids came out here to get to a smaller environment. And so with that, as I became the principal here, I'm officially the COVID principal. I came on board the year that COVID popped up, that 2021 year. That was the year that I started and started coaching out here. So we had a modified, so COVID popped up the year before 1920, and then 2021, we had that modified season and whatnot. And so we played like 5 games, um, and did so in masks and all the things. But we had an opportunity to play some games across the border in Idaho, and so we did a lot of that in the Wilder region, be Western Idaho, and so that's really where we got to play just a ton of basketball. And then as we were doing that, like you could play your older kids and your younger kids. There was just you could just play. And so had a lot of I mean, we played teams from Spokane and Seattle and all the things, and it didn't count, right? There wasn't fans, there wasn't any of that, right? You got to go play in the sandbox, right? You got to make mistakes. And for kids, it was beautiful because there wasn't the parent ride home where you got your butt chewed, right? And there wasn't like you miss this and you miss it. Like it was just freedom for kids, and they would just get a little bit of feedback from coaches and players, but they had the ability to make mistakes and see what worked and see what didn't work and all the things. And so we played that school year, that 2021 school year with we played 5 real OSAA games and but which is Oregon, right? But the rest of it was non-counters. So it was like open gym and with nobody watching. And so we got so much better without all that critiquing and voices in the background and all the things. Like I love parents and all the things they do and the media and all the things, but like we got to do basketball without any of that and no pressure. And that's what made us grow going into our first real season, which was 21-22.
And then the wins start happening. I love how you brought up well, but I love how you bring up the fact that the kids did not have access to their parents, and I love parents and stuff like that, but we all know, and I preach about this, and I've had other people on or guests on my show that we always talk about this. People who this is what they do for a living, the mental health or mental training experts and everything else, is we always talk about the ride home and how that a parent don't make that about a time to relive the what's going on. And, unless the kid
Right?
wants to talk about it, keep it very much, I loved how you played today. Keep it very positive, but don't relive it, especially after a loss, because those kids spend all that energy and they do not need to be hearing about what went wrong, whether it's what they did wrong, what the coaches did wrong, whatever. So the fact that you had a year of that without having that, it really is a testament to how you can make how kids can be successful. Because out of, like I've said before, out of all the environments where you can fail, sports is the best place for it. And in understanding that it's okay if you make a mistake and it's not the end of the world. And the fact that you're able to have those kids for that year to help develop that, which I'm sure was great, not just the physical aspect or, the preparedness as far as getting ready for a season, but what it did to them mentally and how they got them ready to be successful mentally.
Yeah, and Chad, as hard as COVID was, on us with masks and the, being on the computer, all the things, right? As hard as that was for kids, that beauty right there of just being in that, it wasn't a mistake-free environment, but it was, right? They got to experience mistakes without repercussions, right? Yes, they got the repercussion from their, right? But it wasn't from the outside, right? Like there wasn't the COVID championships, right? We didn't have the bubble like the NBA. And so it was just this mistake-free environment where they could screw up and and yeah, they grew closer to their coaches and their teammates and all those things, but it didn't make Twitter, it didn't make Instagram and all the things, and so there just wasn't the pressure. It was awesome, and I really think that laid the topsoil for what we did.
So going through this program and going through the success you had, and like I touched on earlier, finding success for that long with a school is hard. I mean, it's hard even at a big school to be able to repeat as champions or to be successful. But from a bigger school aspect, you obviously got a bigger pool. You got talent constantly coming in. But when you're at a small school like Crane or some of these other places that have very small, sometimes it happens in waves. And so I've seen it at places where there might be a 2-3 year period where things go really well, but then all of a sudden you don't really have the talent like you've had. And some of that is you might have something built below where you can have a middle school or club teams and stuff like that. But having a club team at a 1A school that's especially
Yeah.
isolated like you is probably something that's not really in the cards, because a lot of these kids, they have responsibilities at home. You know, a
Yeah.
lot of these kids are coming from a ranch or a farm, and so their free time is not getting to travel to Boise and Portland and wherever else to play in some tournament over the weekend. They're home on the weekend. They're probably moving animals, or they're cutting crops or whatever it is that they got going on. So how I mean, you talked about that COVID year and what that is able to do. Sustaining that for 4 years, what are some things that helped you with that? What are you looking for? Are you looking for leadership? What is it that you were able to get the kids to buy in over those 4 years? Because obviously winning a championship and then being able to repeat it, but then to do it 4 times, you've set this expectation for the kids. And how do you keep those kids driven and not take things for granted, and so they could find that success multiple times?
Yeah, I think the youth part really goes into it. I think obviously skill development is like that's huge. So that was a big part of it. But I think the other part too is I got better. Like I got better as a coach. When I had my first stints as a young coach when I was in Idaho, and then as my first stint as a head coach in Burns, like I truly released the reins quite a bit more. Like as a basketball coach in my early days, like I was very much a control freak. I'm still definitely a control freak of certain things, but like I let kids play more. We introduced like a lot more actions versus plays, or and so with that said, here's our standards, here's what we're going to do. These are the guardrails that you're going to play within, right? If you go outside those guardrails, like we got issues, but this is what we do. And so I got better at trusting kids and them trusting me and whatnot, because like I let them color the colors they wanted to color, just so long as they didn't color outside the lines. Whereas previously, like it was like, no, this is red, this is blue, whatever. So I definitely got better. And I think that trust with athletes because of that got better. And then I think the other part is we had fun. We just had fun. Like we played music at practice. We laughed. We're a bunch of guys, right? So we didn't cry that much. We cried a little bit, right? But no, we by the end of year one, and this is gonna sound crazy to some folks, but like it was okay, like for us to say, like, "Hey, I love you." Like, that's gonna sound, that's gonna make some folks uncomfortable, but like we would say that, right? And like we would say on December 30th, hey, we don't have practice on December 31st, and we don't have practice on January 1st. And like, we talked about the real issues of what high school kids are going through with alcohol and drugs and like all the things. And right. And like we talked about real stuff, and we were really, really honest with our kids, and just, and our kids knew their strengths and they knew their weaknesses, both inside the basketball arena and outside the basketball arena, right? And, this kid is going to need help navigating those situations on New Year's Eve. And this kid isn't a great shooter, and the stats prove it. And like we talked about that. And we were very, very open and honest with all of our kids, and they were very, very open and honest with each other. Like they knew where Josh Zander was going to shoot, because we all had that open conversation with each other. Josh, you're a great shooter from here, and you suck from here, right? And Tommy, you're really, really good at this, and you suck at this, right? And that's just how we said it, right? But you have to have the relationship to say you suck at this, right? But no,
Right.
that's how we roll, and we had the relationships where we could talk shop, and we confronted each other, and they confronted each other. And in order to have that relationship, it's all based on, I don't have a watch on, but it's all based on time. Like, you gotta spend the time with the kids have to spend the time together, and you got to invest in the kids, and they will invest in you, and they will invest in each other. But we laughed, we cried, we did all the things, and Chad, what I think is another really big piece, those kids knew we loved them, and they knew we loved them because we put in the time. Like, we put in the work, we put in the scouting, we did all the things, and they worked for us. Does it say something to come from a pull up your bootstraps community? And, yeah, but they return the favor if you give it to them. All those kids know, all those kids that have graduated, they know that they can call me, but I also know that I can call them. And like, I check in on them, how's your grades at college, man? And when they send back, their pictures of rodeo, cause I got some kids doing rodeo, whatever. I'm like, hey, thanks for that, Tommy. But I asked how your grades are doing, right? And having those real
Right.
conversations about
Totally.
the life conversations. Like, that's what we did. And that is way bigger than trophies and rings and all the things. That's why we had, even if there wasn't those championship basketball trophies, that stuff is way more important than anything. And that's why we had success on the basketball floor.
Nice. I like it. And so really to me it sounds just like I've heard from other people who've been success. It's the buy-in, you built that relationship, and kids, it's amazing what kids can do if they have trust in you and trust in what you're doing. And the fact that you're able to be that open and have that conversation about, this is what you're good at, this is what you're not good at, this is what I need you to do, all that to me is recipes for finding success. And I think that you guys found that. Obviously, it worked. So, that's kudos to you and your coaching staff. And I mean, really the community. I mean, to the parents and everything else, because they're the ones who help raise those kids to have certain expectations. And then kudos to the community for rallying. Me and my wife always preach this about how important community is to sports programs, especially at the local level. And in those kids seeing you there, you seeing them see other people in the community there at their games and stuff like that, because that really helps as on top of that.
Well, there's no doubt about it, man. That's the good stuff. That's
Right.
the good stuff.
It is. And to me, that's the best part of it is, having that. And when you're winning, that's a bonus. And so you're able to
Right?
do this
Exactly.
for
Yeah.
4 years. So let's kind of talk about some things. Obviously, you've been coaching a while, and let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you have seen that has changed. And you talked about yourself, how you kind of did some soul searching, and you came up with things that you had to do to become better, and how you changed your philosophy and how you were coaching. What are some things that you have seen change just in general, and how coaches should approach coaching from, when you started, we can go back 20 years, let's say, to now? What are some things that you have seen that have changed, whether it's for the better or for the worse? What are some things that you've been kind of noticing?
Chad, I think kids are still kids, right? And whether we've got cell phones and social media and all, like, kids are still kids, and kids are, yes, they have to face this. And yes, they have to face the pressure of always having a camera on them 24/7. So I think the pressures of just being a kid are tough, right? It's hard to make mistakes because you're always being recorded. That sucks. So I think the pressure that's put on just general society of having to be perfect all the time but kids are still kids, and kids still want boundaries. Kids still want discipline generally, and they want consistency. And they want to know that if you say this, that's what you mean, and all the things. I just don't think it's changed that darn much. Yeah, we got social media, and yeah, we got these videos and whatnot, but my high five still feels good, right? And those hugs still feel good, and those 3-pointers still feel good. And school spirit is still school spirit. And I wish there was a whole heck of a lot of more, and I wish there was, I guess, you know what, Chad, I think, as I look at the college level and NIL and, some of those things that haven't impacted me as greatly here because I'm in Timbuk 3, like I said, like the transfer portal, right? Like when I was at Meridian, we had kids leave from Meridian to Mountain View and from Boise to Bora and all the things. That hasn't impacted me quite as much here. We do see it with some private schools and some different schools in the areas of Portland and whatnot, but here directly, not as much. When kids get in trouble at school, sometimes there is a little bit of the vilification of educators and coaches in a nutshell, right? Like, what did the coach do or what did the teacher do to cause this? That hasn't happened
Right.
as much here, but it's just like some of the outside stuff I see versus like what did you do, to say that to the kid as a parent? That's probably the
Right.
biggest overall thing that I've seen in education and coaching, right? Like less on the kid and more on the coaches and the educators, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. That's probably where the dynamics have shifted, but definitely and that's best way to put it. So let's talk about a couple quick things here, and before we move on to another segment. So, what is some of your favorite moments from coaching? It could be when you're a championship, it could be maybe before that, but is there one or two things that are just like stick out to you that were great moments in your coaching experience?
There's a ton. Like I got some books here on my desk and whatnot. Like I don't know if they'll ever hear this, but I coached two young ladies while I was at Meridian in the high jump, and Erica Croy and Carrie Kirkpatrick, and there were some others involved, Marshann Lamson and whatnot, and just had a great deal. And there's just quotes within this, and then they've written some stuff as far as memories and whatnot, and some of the things those little things that were like addition of moments, right? Like the time that you spent with them coaching them in high jump and that those little letters that you get or those little gifts that you get and some of those things those mean a ton, right? And when you've got those bad emails that come across or those bad situations, child abuse and some of those things that dampen your day, you can look up and see some of those things. Those are super helpful. But I'll tell you what, my son played for me, and so that was super. Those were some great experiences. I called him number two on most cases. I didn't call him his name and a lot, and just to kind of keep those boundaries. And we did a good job keeping those boundaries for the most part at home, which was very important. But he hit a buzzer beater in our first run in 2022 in our first round of state against North Douglas to send us into the next round. That was a big one for us. But gosh, there's so many, Chad, like so many. Like I can remember after our last one where our point guard, who nobody thought should have been our point guard after my kiddo was there, just embraced me at the end and was like, "Thank you for believing in me." That's one that sticks in my mind, and just those type things. And it's often not the sports ones, man. It's what sports brings to the relationships. In this rural environment, some people are like, "What are you doing?" Like, no, I choose to be here. Like, I didn't get stuck here. Like, I choose to be here. Rural isn't something that happens to you, right? It's a choice. It's a dang good choice, right? I'm glad more people don't choose it because it continues to be that way. But it's there's just a lot of those good stories, man. That it's too Chad, too many to list, man. But those are some that are coming to mind right now.
You know what? Bringing up your kid, I think that's an important one. So, I mean, because I can remember, for me, I got to coach my daughter as an assistant, and I never wanted to be a head coach with my daughter because, man, to me, that's and I'm sure
Right?
you deal with the whole that part. You understand how that goes. So, I was able to be an assistant coach during her sophomore years, and then being there when certain moments happened and when you get to see it with your kid and stuff like that. But all of her teammates, I loved being around them. It was fun being around them, and for me, coaching, football and stuff like that, coaching other people's kids, there's always great moments there. So yeah, I wasn't trying to put you under pressure there, but obviously your kid should probably
Yeah. I
should get
should
thrown in
mention my
there.
wife, and I should mention my yeah, kid
Yeah,
too.
yeah, and especially your wife, man, because man,
Right, right.
coaching wives, they are the
So,
best. I mean,
I got
being
lucky,
able to
man, so
put
I
up
I
with
yeah,
us.
you are correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
yep. All right, let's talk about what's some advice you would give either to athletes, young athletes that are coming up, or what advances or what advice would you give to young coaches if you got the sit up, give a talk to a bunch of young coaches? What would be some of the advice you would give them that are getting into this profession?
Tell you what, man, there are really good days and there are really, really bad days. You're going to face some fire. And I think it's super, super important to have a support network, both in your community and outside your community, because you can have those anonymous phone calls with folks outside your community. I've had the pleasure, I know you know Casey Hallgarth, and I've had the pleasure of Casey's a school administrator and Casey's outside my community. And so I get to have really good conversations with Casey about things that he knows nothing about, but he can offer a new perspective, both coaching and education. And then internally, right? I think it's important to have some mentors, regardless of your age, right? Folks that you can bounce stuff off before you make good decisions and potentially bad decisions, right? I think those are important things. So have that support network that includes a mentor both inside your community and outside your community. And more than anything, just don't forget to have fun, right? Like if they see you having fun and they see your passion for it, they'll have fun. Like they'll see it. Just put in the work and I guarantee you they'll give it back. That's what kids do. So that's a lot of advice. I probably shouldn't just limited it to one thing, but I think those
No,
things are
that's fine.
important.
That's perfect. Absolutely. So that's some great information there, and I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, man, we got one more segment. I always do this, and you get to be a part of it.
All
So
right.
I always do unusual mascots, high school mascots. So I look all over the country, locally, to all these places that have very unusual mascots. So, like I've
Okay.
said in the past, Bend lava bears, for example, right?
Mm.
Lava bears, that's unique.
Mhm.
Up around or up in Idaho, you got the Orofino Maniacs. Down in Yuma,
Unbelievable.
Arizona, you got the
Can't believe
criminals.
it's still there. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. You got I've done the polka dots, though they're called the dots. Their town,
Ooh.
the school's called Polka. So I've done all these different ones. So I'm actually coming back to Oregon and we're going to Medford.
Okay.
We're going to check out the Medford area. So southwestern
Okay.
part of Oregon. Okay. We're going
Yep.
to North Medford High School. Okay.
Yep.
Population of 1,600 kids,
Yep.
912. School colors, red, black, and white.
Yep.
And the story behind their mascot, dates back to the early 20th century when the original Medford High School's football team became known as the overwhelming their opponents with speed and power. And local sports writers described the team moving through opposing defenses like a tornado in black uniforms. With that, when Medford got too big and they ended up having to split in the 80s, you had North Medford and South Medford. North Medford took that name, the Black Tornadoes. So that is the mascot, the Black Tornadoes. So looking at some notable they've won state in football, 1928,
Yep.
1944, 59, 62,
Yep.
69, 1977, 1985, and 93. Baseball, 60s, 84, 2007, and 2014. Softball, 1984, 1997, 98, 2002, 2009, 2012, 2013, 2017. And then their boys golf has numerous titles from the 80s, from the 50s to the 80s. Some famous alum that came from there. Bill Bowerman, who was co-founder of Nike and was a legendary track coach at Oregon. Dick
Yep.
Fosbury. Everybody knows
Yep.
Fosbury flop,
Fosbury
right?
flop.
High jump
Yep.
technique. Okay. Yeah, Fosbury flop. That's where he went to school. He went to Medford. So there's a couple of famous alum. The town itself, Medford, Oregon, is about 86,000 people. The Medford Grant Pass area combines for about 285,000. Historically, their industry was agriculture and timber. That kind of went away because the area grew. So now it's more healthcare, automotive, stuff like that. They're also kind of a little bit of tourist area because the destination of Crater Lake National Park and the Rogue Valley wine region all kind of come from the same area. Median household is at 417,000. Monthly house cost. Your mortgage, you're looking around $1,800. Renting is $1,300 to $1,400. So that is your mascot of the week, the Black Tornadoes of North Medford.
That away.
Yeah. So, hey, I want to thank Coach Nichols and Eric for joining us. I appreciate it. Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, Chad, I appreciate it, man. And yeah, I will say this. Hey, I'm here to help people, help coaches, help educators, all the things. Call me. I'm not hard to find. Crane Union High School. Call the school, email me, whatever. I'm on social media. I am Eric Nichols. Eric Nichols was taken, so I am Eric Nichols. That's what I had to do. Some guy, I'd pay him for it. I don't know. I'd give him $5 for just Eric Nichols, but anyway. So, but no, holler at me. I'm happy to help. Like, if I can help you in basketball, like, whatever. Like, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm on this earth, is to help folks. So, Chad, I appreciate you having me on, man. It was fun and fun to learn a little bit deeper history about the Medford area. Thank you for that.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Again, everybody, I'd like to thank everybody for listening. I'd like to thank my people listening from afar and abroad, people in Lithuania and Finland and Singapore. I appreciate those people. And I appreciate people in, around the country, here in Idaho and Oregon. I appreciate everybody listening.